Did you know that some locomotives weren't built to carry passengers or cargo, but to transport cannons, troops, and even withstand enemy fire? It's true. During the Great Wars of the 20th century, engineers created monstrous machines that looked more like tanks on rails than trains. These armored giants thundered through battle zones, wrapped in steel, hauling the weight of war across destroyed landscapes. Their engines roared, their cars carried weapons, and their presence changed the course of forgotten conflicts. The wildest part? Most people have never even heard of them. Ever come across the Korea Express or the German train that resembled a diesel-powered fortress? Today, we're diving into the most extreme military locomotives ever built. Trains so massive they bent the rails beneath them, and so powerful they could barely move. Stay tuned, because the final one on this list will make you stop and ask, wait, that actually existed? Stefanik Armored Locomotive. After World War I, Central Europe was a land of uncertainty. The newly formed Czechoslovakia needed a show of strength, something that could move, protect, and intimidate. That's when the Stefanik Armored Locomotive was born, around 1919. Named after Milan Rostislav Stefanik, one of the nation's founding heroes, this machine started life as an ordinary steam locomotive, until engineers turned it into a rolling fortress. Thick steel plates were welded around the cabin, the boiler, and the tender, transforming it into a mobile bunker on rails. Powered by coal and driven by steam, the Stefanik burned through nearly 2,200 pounds of fuel every hour, reaching a top speed of just 18 miles per hour. But speed wasn't its mission, survival was. Its powerful boiler could haul several armored cars equipped with light cannons and machine guns, ready to fight back from the tracks. Inside, conditions were brutal. The heat from the boiler mixed with the smell of oil and gunpowder. The sound of clanking metal and hissing steam filled the cramped steel corridors. Every moment on board felt like a battle in itself. The Stefanik saw real combat during the border clashes of the 1920s, escorting supply trains, guarding critical rail lines, and deterring enemy sabotage. At a time when control of the rails could decide entire battles, this machine became both a weapon and a symbol of national resolve. Today, the Stefanik Armored Locomotive stands preserved in railway museums, remembered as a symbol of Slovak resistance. Records show it took part in over 20 combat missions, proving that even a temporary fix could become a legend of steel. And if you think this iron beast was intense, wait until you see the next model, a wartime improvisation that survived one of the most brutal conflicts of the 1990s. The Hrvatski oklopni vlak. In the early 1990s, as the Balkans descended into one of the deadliest post-Cold War conflicts, something straight out of an action movie thundered onto the tracks, the Hrvatski oklopni vlak, or Croatian armored train. Unlike the industrial military locomotives of the past, this beast was pure improvisation. Built in 1991 by Croatian forces, it began life as a regular civilian train, then was rapidly transformed into a rolling fortress. Thick steel plates were welded around the engine, cab, and train cars, forming a rugged shield against enemy fire. It looked like a Frankenstein of war, built from whatever metal was available. Powered by a 1,200 horsepower diesel engine, it could haul troops, machine guns, and light artillery with surprising power. Its traction came from central axles, and even under the weight of armor, it could hit 25 miles per hour depending on track conditions. Inside, the environment was harsh. No comfort, no space, just cold steel, ammunition, and the ever-present danger of ambush. Narrow firing slits lined the sides, while radios offered minimal communication between cars. The train served in some of the fiercest zones, reinforcing defenses, transporting supplies, and executing rapid counterattacks, particularly around Vukovar. Visually, it was terrifying. A dark, armored locomotive dragging cars topped with makeshift turrets and patched with metal scavenged from trucks and shipping containers. Despite its improvised build, it became a symbol of Croatian resistance. In one legendary moment, it took multiple RPG hits and kept moving, refusing to die. That kind of resilience turned the Hrvatski oklopni vlak into more than a weapon. It became a story of survival on rails. And if you think that was extreme, wait until you see the next one, a Slovak armored train built to take on tanks head-on.
Hurban armored train Zvolen.
In 1944, as World War II tore Europe apart, Slovak resistance fighters were waging a desperate battle for their homeland. From that chaos emerged one of the most remarkable symbols of their defiance, the Hurban, an armored train built in the town of Zvolen during the Slovak national uprising. This wasn't a factory-made war machine. It was hand-built by patriots, railway workers, and engineers who turned a standard steam locomotive into a rolling fortress. Thick steel plates wrapped around the boiler, cab, and wagons, transforming it into a moving wall of metal. The steam engine burned through nearly 3,300 pounds of coal per hour, and while its top speed was only about 19 miles per hour, it had the muscle to pull 8 to 10 armored cars through steep and broken terrain. Each car was armed to the teeth. 75mm cannons, heavy machine guns, sniper nests, and rotating turrets lined its decks. The crew even reinforced the suspension by hand, preparing it for the weight of armor and the unforgiving hills of central Slovakia. Visually, the Hurban was unforgettable, a black, steam-belching giant thundering through forests and mountains, its wheels clanging, its guns blazing. Wherever it went, it carried the sound of resistance, the hiss of steam, the crack of gunfire, and the rumble of courage. The Hurban wasn't just a weapon, it was a lifeline. It fought in direct combat, rescued the wounded, and defended crucial railway lines. Historical records credit it with over 20 engagements before it was finally destroyed by German airstrikes near the end of the uprising. But its spirit didn't die. Today, a full-scale replica of the Hurban stands proudly at the Railway Museum in Zvolen, honoring the bravery and ingenuity of those who built it. And if you think that's impressive, wait until you see what came next. A Balkan war train so heavily armored and fearsome, soldiers called it the Monster on Rails. The Krajina Express. Between 1991 and 1995, amid the brutal wars in Bosnia and Croatia, a makeshift war train appeared that earned a terrifying nickname from enemy troops, the Krajina Express, or simply the Monster on Rails. Assembled by forces of the self-proclaimed Republic of Serbian Krajina, it wasn't a museum piece but a lethal improvisation, a diesel locomotive pulling up to 10 heavily armored wagons at roughly 25 miles per hour when fully loaded. Each car was effectively a moving fortress, bristling with heavy machine guns, 120mm mortars, anti-aircraft mounts, rocket projectors, and sniper nests, and some cars were wrapped in triple-layered armor fashioned from welded railroad rails. The control cab was encased in thick steel, and the whole train was layered with sandbags and even concrete for added protection. Inside, it was brutal and claustrophobic, the air thick with burning oil, stifling heat from the engine, and the constant grind of metal on metal that wore down nerves as much as tracks. Crews relied on radios for coordination and an onboard generator for power. The Krajina Express was used for direct assaults, patrols, and lightning strikes along contested rail lines, and it became legend after surviving an air raid and keeping on mission despite heavy damage. On one occasion, soldiers even physically shoved cars over broken rails to prevent capture. The mere sound of its approach, iron groaning, diesel rumbling, was said to freeze opposing troops in place. Tales of its exploits circulated long after the conflict ended, cementing its reputation as a fearsome wartime improvised weapon. Buckle up! If that felt ruthless, the next story moves into truly industrial military logistics. A German armored rail locomotive built to haul supplies and weapons across whole continents.
Class 52 World War II German.
During World War II, Nazi Germany needed a locomotive that was cheap to build, durable under pressure, and simple enough for mass production. The result was the Class 52 Kriegslokomotive, introduced in 1942, a wartime workhorse still regarded as one of the most efficient military locomotives ever built. More than 6,300 units rolled out of factories across occupied Europe. Steam-powered and brutally efficient, the Class 52 produced around 1,620 horsepower and could haul over 2.26 million pounds of cargo. It burned about 220 pounds of coal per mile and consumed roughly 11 gallons of water per mile. A hungry but unstoppable machine. Its design favored practicality over comfort, a 2-1-0 wheel configuration that gave it incredible traction on destroyed and frozen tracks, especially on the brutal Eastern Front. Though it wasn't armored by default, many units hauled armored trains and artillery convoys, and some were fitted with steel plating around the cab and boiler when operating near combat zones. Visually, it was intimidating. Massive drive wheels, clouds of steam rising like smoke from a battlefield, and that thunderous chug echoing across miles. It didn't need guns to be deadly. Without it, tanks, troops, and weapons would have never reached the front lines. Today, dozens of Class 52s survive in European museums, reminders of the crucial, and often overlooked, role railways played in shaping modern warfare. Enjoyed this journey through history's most extreme war trains? Then hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, because next we're looking at a train that didn't just carry weapons, it was. The Panzertriebwagen 16. When Nazi Germany set out to build a train that wasn't just a transporter, but a weapon, they created one of the most fearsome machines ever to ride the rails, the Panzertriebwagen 16, or PZTRW 16. Built around 1942, this wasn't your typical locomotive pulling armored cars. The entire vehicle was the weapon, a self-contained armored war train designed for combat. Powered by a 550 horsepower diesel engine, it could reach speeds of up to 25 miles per hour, an impressive feat considering it weighed over 140,000 pounds. The armor was 1.2 inches thick, enough to shrug off small arms fire and light artillery blasts. And sitting right on top was its main weapon, a turret borrowed from the Panzer IV tank armed with a 75mm cannon. For close defense, it carried two MG-34 machine guns mounted along the sides, ready to mow down infantry or repel ambushes. Underneath, an 8-axle suspension distributed its massive weight, allowing it to handle uneven tracks and stay stable even under fire. Inside, space was tight but efficient. Command post, engine room, ammunition storage, and cramped bunks for a 12-man crew who lived, fought, and maintained the beast. The PZTRW-16 mainly operated in Poland and Ukraine, patrolling vital railways and responding to partisan sabotage missions. One recorded battle saw it endure a 4-hour ambush involving mines, rifles, and artillery. Despite heavy damage, it managed to retreat safely and keep the track secure, earning legendary status among armored train units. Today, the only surviving Panzertriebwagen 16 stands proudly at the Military Technical Museum in Koblenz, Germany, a silent, steel reminder of the era when trains weren't just tools of war, but weapons themselves. And if you thought this was intense, wait till you see what the Soviets built. A moving fortress on rails armed to the teeth, ready to go head-to-head with tanks. MBV-2. In the late 1930s, as the Soviet Union ramped up its push for mechanized warfare, its engineers turned their attention to something extraordinary, a battle-ready train capable of taking on tanks and defending vast stretches of territory. The result was the MBV-2, short for Mobile Armored Wagon No. 2, one of the most ambitious rail-based weapons ever built. Developed around 1938, only 3 units were ever completed, but each one was a masterpiece of industrial engineering. Weighing a staggering 480,000 pounds, the MBV-2 wasn't just a locomotive pulling armored cars, it was a self-contained mobile fortress. It featured 2 internal diesel engines, one at each end, which meant it could drive forwards or backwards without ever turning around, a major tactical advantage during wartime. On straight, stable tracks, it could hit speeds of up to 28 miles per hour, remarkable for something that heavy and armored. Its steel plating was nearly 8 inches thick, capable of shrugging off rifle fire and even some anti-tank rounds. At the heart of the machine sat its main turret, equipped with a 76mm cannon, the same type found on Soviet T-28 tanks. Supporting it were multiple DT machine guns, manned by a crew of 15 to 20 soldiers who lived, worked, and fought inside the steel beast. The reinforced axle and suspension system kept it rolling even under tremendous stress, while the interior was divided into engine rooms, command sections, artillery bays, and crew quarters, turning it into a full-scale war bunker on rails. The MBV-2 saw action during World War II, primarily along the Eastern Front, where it patrolled key rail lines, escorted troop convoys, and acted as a mobile command post. In one famous account from Belarus, an MBV-2 reportedly survived multiple ambushes by partisan fighters, returning fire with its main gun and continuing operations for months without serious damage. Though only a few were made, the MBV-2 left a powerful legacy. It proved that a well-designed armored train could function as both a weapon and a command platform, influencing later Soviet military train designs throughout the Cold War. Today, a replica MBV-2 stands proudly in Russian military museums, still drawing crowds stunned by its sheer size, firepower, and audacity. And if you think 480,000 pounds of armored steel sounds over the top, wait until you see the next locomotive, a German monster so heavy it nearly broke its own tracks. Soviet AA-21. Some locomotives are built for efficiency, others just to make a statement. The AA-20, designed in 1934, falls squarely into that second category. Built by the Soviet Union, it remains the largest steam locomotive ever constructed in Europe, and perhaps one of the most impractical machines ever to touch the rails. Its name came from its wheel configuration, 4-14-4. That's right, 14 driving wheels and no articulated joints. The 20 referred to the total number of axles, including the supports. The goal was simple but ambitious: to create a locomotive with enough traction and power to haul incredibly heavy military freight across the vast Soviet landscape. Powered by a massive steam engine, the AA-20 devoured over 4,400 pounds of coal per hour, producing around 3,500 horsepower. On paper, it could pull trains weighing more than 6.5 million pounds, but its top speed? Only about 37 miles per hour, and that was under perfect track conditions. The real issue was its sheer size. Measuring over 130 feet long, the AA-20 struggled to navigate tight curves or older rail lines. Its suspension frequently failed, and several tracks had to be reinforced just to bear its weight. While it saw limited testing and a few ceremonial appearances, it was mostly used as a propaganda symbol, showcasing Soviet engineering might rather than practical transport capability. Visually, though, it was breathtaking. Towering wheels, a thundering boiler, and billowing clouds of steam that made it look like something out of myth. By the late 1930s, it was retired as unfeasible, but it never faded from memory. The AA-20 became a lasting symbol of Soviet ambition, proof of how far engineers were willing to push the limits of steel and steam. Here's a fascinating twist. In 1950, Soviet designers actually considered reviving the AA-20 using diesel-electric power, but the project was scrapped. Too costly, too complex, even by Cold War standards. And if you think that's extreme, wait for the next two machines, trains that didn't haul cargo at all. They were the weapons. Krupp K5. When it comes to long-range firepower, few machines in history rival the sheer madness of the Krupp K5, a railway gun so massive it turned entire train lines into mobile artillery bases. Developed by the German arms giant Krupp in 1936, the K5 wasn't a locomotive in the usual sense. It was a 280mm cannon mounted on a specially built rail chassis that absorbed the recoil and spread out its enormous 440,000-pound weight. Since it couldn't move on its own, it needed a dedicated locomotive just to be repositioned. The K5's firing range was incredible, over 37 miles when using high-velocity shells. Every shot demanded precise setup. The track had to be perfectly level, the barrel realigned after each round, and a crew of 25 to 30 soldiers operated the entire system like a roaming artillery fortress. For movement, the K5 relied on steam or diesel locomotives that hauled it to firing positions at speeds of barely 12 miles per hour. It could only operate on reinforced railway lines strong enough to handle its immense bulk. The K5 saw heavy action during World War II, especially in France and Italy. One unit, nicknamed Anzio Annie by Allied troops, became infamous for firing more than 400 shells during the Battle of Anzio in 1944, devastating enemy positions with terrifying force. Witnesses described the experience as unreal. A 90-foot barrel unleashing clouds of smoke and thunder, the ground trembling as the shell roared away. Its blast could be heard for miles, and each impact left behind craters the size of buildings. Today, only 2 K5 units remain, one in Aberdeen, Maryland, and the other in France, standing as silent reminders of the extremes engineers once reached to dominate warfare from the rails. But even the mighty K5 looks tiny next to what came next, a weapon so colossal it wasn't just big, it was the largest artillery piece ever built. The Schwere Gustav. When we talk about the extremes of military engineering, nothing, absolutely nothing, tops the Schwere Gustav. Built by Krupp in the late 1930s for Nazi Germany, this wasn't just a railway gun, it was a monument to destruction, the largest artillery weapon ever created. Gustav was engineered for one purpose: to obliterate the French Maginot Line, a series of massive underground fortifications that ordinary bombs couldn't touch. To achieve that, German engineers built a cannon with an 800mm, 31.5-inch caliber, capable of firing 7-ton shells over 29 miles. The gun itself weighed an astonishing 3 million pounds, making it so heavy it had to be mounted on dual railway tracks. 2 steam locomotives were needed just to reposition it, and every single firing operation required over 250 soldiers working for hours to prepare one shot. The platform sat on 80 wheels to distribute the weight, and when Gustav fired, it was an event of pure devastation. Each shot created a shockwave so intense that smoke clouds were visible for miles, and tremors were felt in nearby towns. Witnesses said the gun's thunderous roar could be heard more than 10 miles away. Its most famous moment came during the Siege of Sevastopol in 1942, where Gustav's shells obliterated underground Soviet bunkers, collapsing fortifications that no other weapon could reach. It was devastatingly effective, but also wildly impractical. The gun's sheer size made it a logistical nightmare, and as air power evolved, its slow deployment and vulnerability made it obsolete almost overnight. By the war's end, Gustav was dismantled to prevent capture. Today, only parts and replicas remain, scattered in museums and archives. But its legend lives on. The Schwere Gustav stands as a chilling reminder of how far humans once went to build the biggest, heaviest, and most terrifying weapon ever to ride the rails. From improvised armored trains in Slovakia to these steel titans of destruction, history proves one thing: the battlefield didn't just run on tanks or foot soldiers, it ran on rails too. These locomotives weren't just machines, they were symbols of power, survival, and innovation. Each one represented resistance, domination, and raw engineering genius, serving as mobile fortresses, command hubs, artillery bases, and even rolling propaganda tools that reshaped the history of warfare. In the chaos of battle, where terrain, weather, and distance could turn the tide, it was often these rail-bound giants that kept entire armies supplied, connected, and advancing. So tell me, which of these military locomotives blew your mind the most? Which one would you want to see in person or ride into history if you had the chance? And if stories like this ignite your curiosity, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and stick around, because every week we uncover more of the most incredible machines ever to thunder across rails, deserts, snow, and battle-scarred ground. See you in the next video.